right now. Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome inside the Fan Cave. This is the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Bob Pompeani here in this studio. Andrew Fillipponi is up at 93.7 The Fan. You can hit us up on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at KD Pomp, at the Pony Express. Andrew, I'm going to start with the Pirates because they lost their 10th of 11th today, and they got swept by another division rival, which would be the Chicago Cubs, en route to them popping some champagne. They get to the playoffs, most likely in that wild card, of course, and maybe hosting it. I like that team, Chicago, but I want to talk about what this does for the future of Ben Cherington. We had a discussion today on the radio today, Joe and I, about what this means. And Joe's of the opinion that because they've lost at the end, it may signal the end for Ben Cherington. But I happen to believe that I think if that were to happen, it would have happened when Shelton was fired, and I don't think there's going to be a change. How do you sit on this?
I thought Ben Cherington acted at the trade deadline like he needed to win in August and September to keep his job.
If they don't do anything in the offseason, I'm going to be highly disappointed because the Skeens window, as I always like to measure things by, is still open, but just for a short period of time. We saw the highlights today, the Cubs, and boy, they got a good hitting team. You know, they're not even with Kyle Tucker, who's out. He's been injured, but they have a lot of good players on that team. I happen to think, Pony, so much of them after watching them the last few nights over there that I put a little wager on them to win the World Series. Why not? The odds were in my favor. When you look at the teams in the National League, the Dodgers are swooning. You know, the Brewers have been steady all the way through, and Pat Murphy should win back-to-back Managers of the Year. But what's your take on the Cubs and what they may be able to do or not?
Well, they got to get Kyle Tucker back, I think, if they're going to win the World Series. I mean, that's a vital, that's a big bat. I don't think you can just subtract him and make your way through here the postseason. I like their lineup. I think they've got a lineup that's probably good enough to compete. I think they're pitching. You know, it's an interesting point, Bob, because now that I think about this, I'm going through the last few World Series winners. They were mostly built on their bats and not their arms. You know, we're all excited about the future of the Pirates pitching staff, but if you look at the last few teams that have won the World Series, the Dodgers, the Texas Rangers, these weren't teams that had great rotations. They were teams that had awesome lineups and were able to drive in a lot of runs and score big runs. I mean, the Rangers got through a World Series with pretty much 3 starting pitchers, and they went the whole way. So, you know, I'd say the Cubs, if I'm going to rank teams that can win the World Series out of the National League, you know, I would put the Phillies ahead of them, and I would put the Brewers ahead of them too. But, you know, if you showed me those odds, maybe you could persuade me, Bob, if they're as low as you make them out to be. I happen to like Boston. I think Boston's odds are ridiculously low, given the fact that they've got Garrett Crochet at the top of their rotation, Aroldis Chapman closing games, and I think they've got a very young, spunky lineup. I think they've got a lot of tough outs in that lineup and guys that don't strike out a ton. So they're kind of my dark horse to keep an eye on in the American League.
You know, I think about Aroldis Chapman, and he's been just sensational again this year. He keeps throwing that ball at 100 miles an hour at his age. Pirates had a chance to bring him back here. Not that it would have made a difference, but they chose not to. He got a raise to go to Boston, but still, one of those situations where they let a guy go who was here, and there was no evidence to think that he couldn't keep doing what he was doing. Got our Penn West University nightly sports call poll. It's KDKA.com Connect, and this is the question: which Pittsburgh sports franchise is the closest to having playoff success? And right now, the Pirates are not winning, as you would expect. The Penguins are at 50% over the Steelers' 40%. I don't know if I'd go there. I think the Steelers have a better chance of making it this year. I don't know about the Penguins this year, so if it goes beyond this year, maybe the Penguins, but I would say the Steelers would be the correct answer. How about you?
You know, weird things happen in hockey. We've seen that happen where teams just sneak in and they go far. That's not happened a lot lately, but in the past it has. I just feel like the Penguins, outside of maybe the Sharks and Blackhawks, they might have the worst team on paper in the entire Eastern Conference. And that's really remarkable when you've got Sidney Crosby still playing as well as he is at 38 years old. And, you know, you still have some big contracts around in Erik Karlsson, Ryan Graves, Brian Rust, Rickard Rakell.
Chris Letang,
I just feel like
Denny Malkin,
Tristan Jarry.
Yeah.
I just feel like preventing goals is a major problem. Chris Letang had a big, I thought, big-time disappointing season last year. Carlson has never figured it out here. I don't feel like they've got young defensemen that make me think they're ready to step into top 4 roles and be difference makers there, and their goaltending is still a massive question mark. So, yeah, I'm with you. I disagree with our viewers right now who think they're the closest. I think unless that's taken into account that they think they're going to win the lottery and get Gavin McKenna here, short of that, I think the Penguins are the team that's probably the farthest away from winning.
Penguins hockey training camp begins tomorrow, and I will say they have some good young prospects, but they're a while away from being here. So, Kyle Dubas, that's part of his process. He wants to bring in people who can stack this organization.
Is Fleury going to talk tomorrow? Are we going to hear from Marc-Andre? Is he going to get in the mix here right from day one?
Is he going to be here the whole time? Is that the understanding? I thought he might be coming in.
I don't know.
Well, I tell you what, Artur Shilovs is a guy you should remember because I think that that goaltender has an interesting case to be made for maybe being the Penguins starter. We'll see. We got to take a break on that. And by the way, Andrew, happy anniversary to you and Amanda. I didn't know why you weren't here yesterday, and I found out it was for that. So you're a romantic at heart. And
thank you, Bob.
How many years has it been?
We have been married now for 8 years, and we've been together for several more. And I don't want to say the number because I'm afraid I'm going to get it wrong, and she's going to hear about it, and she's going to get mad at me.
It's a very smart move on your behalf. You're absolutely right how to handle that. We got to take a break, come back. Your phone calls are on the way at 412-575-2600. You're looking at Acrisure Stadium, and this week the Steelers won't be there. They're going to be in New England. We'll talk about that matchup and more coming up next right here on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. All right, welcome back. This is our Xfinity tweet of the night, and we had this last night, but since you weren't here, Pony, I want to get your take on this. Has Baker Mayfield reached elite status? I say yes, and if you look at these numbers, they confirm that, I think. At least he's on par with some of these guys. I would never put him ahead of Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes just yet, but he's my pick to win NFL MVP this year, and if you saw the game against the Texans, which I know you did, you saw him at his very best at the end of that game, specifically on a 4th and 10 where he somehow escaped, got the necessary yardage, wanted more, and then led them all the way down very methodically, very systematically. Is he elite in your view?
Well, it depends where you cut off elite. I mean, for me, he's not an elite quarterback because he hasn't won an MVP. He hasn't been to a Super Bowl. He hasn't won a Super Bowl. He hasn't been an All-Pro. So I reserve that for the absolute top-shelf guys. But is he a quarterback I can win with and compete with and get to the playoffs with and win playoff games with? Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he's shown that now that he's been in Tampa for a few years. And he's doing it now with a very injured team.
They spent over $100 million just, I mean, that's a bargain by today's quarterback standards. The fact that he is not even making in the top, I think, 20 of the top, that's good for Tampa. They recognized it. He was grateful to get it. He took it, and that's a franchise-friendly contract.
Yeah, and they've got injuries on their offensive line, and Godwin's still hurt. And Clyde Cansey's now out for the year.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
So they're going to play the Jets this weekend. The Jets are going to start Tyrod Taylor because Justin Fields was concussed against the Bills. I would not look at that game if I'm Tampa as a win. I would not use permanent marker yet because Tyrod Taylor, much like Joe Flacco and Andy Dalton, have a history of winning and coming off the bench and winning games. So the Jets might even be tougher with Taylor. You know he's not going to turn the ball over. You know he's not going to do dumb things. And he might be able to get the ball to some of the receivers, although we saw Fields do that great against the Steelers. But he might be able to do that more consistently than Justin Fields was able to do.
All right, let's go to the phone lines because a lot of people want to talk, so we want to listen to their calls. John and Cranberry are first up right here on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Go ahead, John.
Hey, Bob and Andrew. It's good to talk to you tonight. So I wanted to piggyback off of what you said about the Pirates. So I think Mr. Cherington will be relieved of his duties. I was thinking today, pitching aside, I don't think there's one positional player that improved offensively from last year to this year, and you can go through the list. But my question, the guy I want to key on tonight and ask you guys about is O'Neal Cruz. He's tied for the league lead in errors in the outfield. He has balls going through his legs. There was a play last week where he thought there was 2 outs when there was 1 out. He constantly makes mistakes. My question to you guys is also arbitration is going to be coming up for him soon. Mm-hmm. if you were running the team, would you move Cruz this offseason or try to, or would you stick with him? I want to get your opinion on it. Thanks, guys.
It's a good question, John. I would stick with him only because, as you say, nobody got better offensively. They're still looking for bats. I would try to figure out what's going on with him and get him to be better. Donnie Kelly, I know, has talked to him quite a bit. There was a time, Andrew, where a lot of people thought that they should have signed him a couple of years ago to one of those big deals before he really proved himself. I'm glad they didn't. I think it's prudent to wait in his case. I would say differently for Connor Griffin if that ever became a topic. But I think they need to stick with him because they have no other bats. He has all the physical talent. We saw that. He's even on a bad year where, what's he batting, 203 or something? He still has 37 or 38 stolen bases. He has almost 20 home runs. The talent is there. He's just got to be committed more.
I think you got to call his agent to town, and I think you got to have a sit down with him and O'Neal Cruz and say, we're not going to trade you now because we would be selling low on you. It's pretty obvious through his body language and the way he's acting that this is probably not where he needs to be. And I would tell him, look, that's fine with us, but you've got to perform in order for us to even move you. That onus falls back on you, and you got to get your career together here before we just, sell you off to another team. They're going to get ripped off if they do that.
Yes.
A team's going to try to fleece the Pirates because they're going to see his 200 batting average and all his strikeouts and all his errors and think, man, we're not going to have to give up much to get him based on his performance in the second half of the season, really across the board. You can't trade him now.
No.
I don't think he wants to be here. I think he's done with Pittsburgh, but I think he played his way back here with his the caller was right. I mean, his effort at times, his focus, all of those things have been very suspect. That's why Donnie Kelly benched him again the other night. And that's one of the big failures of the Pirates this season is that it looked early on like this was going to be a breakout year for O'Neal Cruz, Bob, and instead it's probably his worst year as a professional baseball player.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And that's why I say I'm not going to get rid of him now just because you're right. You wouldn't get a return that you would like. Someone could take him and turn him into something that the Pirates thought he could be, and he's not. So, plus they have nobody else hitting the ball. They need to get the best out of him somehow, some way. Let's go to Fred in North Huntington. What's up, Fred? How are you?
Hi, Bob. Hi, Andrew. Thanks for taking my call.
Anytime.
Hey, Bob, over the last couple drafts, the Steelers have invested, a lot of money, a lot of high draft picks in the offensive line. And they can't run the football, and that's killing this football team. We know what the problem, the defense is terrible. But, they can't control the clock because you can't run the ball. And if you think about next year, Bob, when Rodgers isn't going to be here, and you're going to probably draft, a quarterback maybe in the first or second round, to hopefully be your future quarterback, do you want that young quarterback being with this offensive line right now who can't protect anybody?
Well, at some point you have to believe in what you've gotten. And so far, 2 number 1 picks on the tackles, still works in progress. I think Frazier solidified himself. Mason McCormick is okay over there. I'm more future-wise optimistic about what this line can do. But as far as, you have what you have. You've got to do better in the draft because over the last 5 drafts, they haven't exactly turned over a nice roster of players through that draft. So, Andrew, they got a lot of work to do there, but that run game does need a lot of attention right now.
I thought Aaron Rodgers was very honest today when he said because of the way that teams played us, Seattle, with the 2 high safeties, we got to run the ball against that defense. And they tried, and they still couldn't do it.
And on the other side of the ball, they stacked the box against Kenneth Walker, and he averaged 8.1 yards per carry, whatever it was.
Right. Exactly. If you can't run the ball against teams that are giving you that soft box, then you've really got problems. And here's something I have a hard time reconciling. If the strength of the offensive line is inside, and you've got Sayamalu, Zach Frazier, everybody says is great, and no one wants to say a bad word about McCormick either, why can't you run the ball between the tackles? Explain to me that. You're telling me Sayamalu, Frazier, and McCormick can't run block? If they're as good as people are making them out to be around the team, then why can't you run the ball between the tackles behind those guys, Bob?
Yeah, they should be able to do it.
I don't understand that.
And, quite frankly, it's got to be Warren getting more of these carries. Gainwell and John, I don't even know if Caleb Johnson's going to be able to dress this week. I mean, I'm torn thinking about him because as someone who would like to give another guy a shot at some capacity because he is young, he hasn't really done much, and he needs to get opportunities to redeem himself. That's one part, but then at the other side, he may not even carry the ball. So if he doesn't, Trey Sermon sitting on that practice squad, maybe bring him up and give him a shot. We'll talk about that, Andrew. I'll get your response when we come back, but we're overdue for a break. We'll take it right now on KDKA Plus and 93.7 The Fan. It's the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. All right, Andrew, your take on the running back distribution of carries and Trey Sermon.
Well, look, I think Caleb Johnson has looked, really a fish out of water as a return man. I never thought he should have been back there in the first place. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really impressed with him in the preseason. However, you don't want to waste a third-round pick. That's a pretty important pick. So I think burying him is also a pretty bad idea. And I don't think Trey Sermon really has a future with the Steelers. So I would still play Caleb Johnson, and I would try to get him more involved in the offense, especially if you can't run the ball with Jaylen Warren. I'd rather see what Caleb Johnson can do than Kenneth Gainwell, to be honest with you, Bob.
Yeah, he's the one that kind of odd man out, I think. I mean, they started him, and he got more snaps than anyone in the first game. In the second one, that changed with Warren getting most of it. He had all-purpose yards good. That's why I want to see them get more for him. But you're right, at some point, and that's why I say it's difficult to, if he's not going to have a role in this game, then he's probably, maybe not going to get a helmet to play, but at some point they need to, and I think Mike Tomlin knows that, he needs to get back in the action and don't lose him. Give him an opportunity to redeem himself. Now let's get to the results of this KDK.com Connect poll, brought to you by Penn West University. Which of these franchises is closer to having a playoff success? Andrew, the winner is the Penguins on this.
Jeez.
50 to 42%, Pirates down to 8.
Wow. The Pirates have that pitching, but someone's got to figure out a way to hit the ball over the fence.
Yes or no? Would you bring Connor Griffin up to start the season next year? Starting lineup, first day.
No, but he would be at AAA at the start of the season. He would be here by Memorial Day at the latest.
All right. Well, we'll see. He's having a good year and certainly a good game one of the playoffs, which was last night against Erie. Pony, thanks as always. Appreciate it. We'll see you again over the weekend. And thank you for joining us. Good night, everyone.